What's going on, everybody? Welcome to After Prison Show, and today I want to share with you the top 5 scariest things about going to prison. You know, for anybody who might ever say that they're not scared to get locked up or to go to prison, 2 things come to mind when I think about that. 1, they're dumb for even thinking that, and 2, they're definitely lying. I don't care how many times you have ever been locked up in your life, if it's your first time or if it's your 14th time. Anytime that you get locked up, you're gonna be scared. And for a number of reasons at that. And again, in this video, I want to share with you the top 5 scariest things about getting locked up and going to prison. The very first thing to make this list has to be the overall experience. What is this time, again, if it's your first time or your 15th or 20th time, what is this time going to be like? Is this going to be a somewhat easy ride? Is this going to be the toughest time that you've ever spent in your life? The most difficult thing that you'll ever be faced with that you have no choice but to deal with? Are you going to be fighting all of the time? Are you going to have problems with other prisoners? Or even the staff? What kind of guards are you going to have to deal with? What kind of housing situations, cell blocks, or housing units will you be kept in? What will your cellie be like? What will the guy who sleeps beside you be like? Will you have to deal with people potentially trying to jump on your case, testifying or snitching on you? Will you lose contact with your loved ones if you have any out there? Will the girlfriend that you have be able to stick it out and ride it out with you? Or will you end up spending this entire stay, however long that it ends up being, alone? There will be so many thoughts that immediately fill your mind as soon as those handcuffs are put on you and you're thrown in the back of a cop car. In that moment, you will be wondering and questioning everything. And I don't care how big of a guy, how tough, how hardcore, how thuggish, what your fight game is like, it doesn't matter. From the biggest dudes to the littlest, puniest dudes, even the biggest dudes who think that they won't have any problems because they're too big for anyone to test them, or nobody's gonna mess with me once they see what my fight game is like. Trust and believe me, they're gonna be thinking the exact same thing. What will this overall experience be like this time as I'm sitting in the back of this cop car right now on my way to jail to face whatever is gonna come? And again, no matter who you are, no matter how big or how small that you are, that's going to be a very scary thought. The second scariest thing about being locked up to make this list is not knowing how much time you're going to end up serving. You know, again, when you first get locked up, your mind's going to be going all over the place, 100,000 miles an hour, thinking about every single little thing. And guaranteed to be the top thought is exactly how much time you're going to have to serve, and not knowing, but wondering and thinking, hoping and worrying. What exactly is going to happen to me when I go to court for this? I can guarantee you that for anybody who has ever served time, the unknown, the not knowing part immediately upon getting locked up and awaiting your trial or awaiting your court date when you'll go take a plea, that is going to be the most stressful and scariest time. Because really, you have no idea what's going to happen to you when you go into that courtroom. All you know is you've got whatever charges that you're locked up for. And guys telling you, oh, you could get this much time. You might get that much time. If you get this judge, it could go that way. If you don't get this prosecutor, you stand a way better chance. And what makes all of this worse as you're awaiting whatever court date you may have coming up is seeing other guys go and come back from court before you. And seeing some of these guys getting absolutely lit up inside of the courtroom because he had such and such judge, because he had such and such prosecutor. Guess what? There's a possibility you could have either of those two, if not both. Seeing these guys coming back from court, walking into the cell block or housing unit, looking like they're not even there, looking like they're a zombie, walking in like there is nothing inside of their eyes because they just got that much time, 15 or 20 plus years or even way more. I literally watched the guy go to court and come back who got 208 years. This guy came back, walked into my cell and told me the judge just gave me 208 years because I didn't take a plea deal for 25 years. What would you do if you were in that situation? Imagine being locked up, awaiting a charge of your own, and seeing a guy come back into the housing unit telling you that he just got 200 plus years. You want to talk about scary? And as this guy's telling you this, he looks like a ghost. Like there's just nothing in his eyes. His soul has been completely taken out of his body with the realization that he will never again see the free world. To think that as you're awaiting your own situation, you will be absolutely scared to death. As you're laying in your bunk at night and you can't sleep because all you can think about is this upcoming court date, because all you can think about is what just happened to Goo or what just happened to Trey. And you know there will come a time, guaranteed, where you will be laying in that bunk thinking about that time, thinking about your own situation and what could potentially happen. Your mind will just continuously be racing with the what ifs, and it'll be quiet. It'll be one of the only times when it is quiet inside of that cell block or that housing unit. And as you're laying there thinking, worrying, hoping, praying over your own situation, thinking about everybody who you've already watched go to court before you, in that one quiet moment, which is guaranteed to happen, there's also a very good possibility that you'll hear one of those people crying because they realize that their life is completely over and you're still awaiting your fate. You know, I tell you guys about how loud and obnoxious it is in jail and in prison pretty much 24/7. You know, something to consider with that is maybe a reason that it is because who really wants it to be quiet in there when all they're really left with are their own thoughts of their situation and what could happen with them. And in those moments when it is quiet and you are thinking and you are potentially hearing other grown men crying, you're going to find yourself wishing that it wasn't quiet, that it was turned up to a level 12, just like how it pretty much will be any other time, day or night. And you know, to further continue with this not knowing about the time that you're going to receive or what you could potentially receive, just as scary as all of that leading up to going to court will be for you, and I guarantee you it will absolutely be terrifying, just as scary as all of that will be, no matter if it's your first time or your umpteenth time being locked up, there is no scarier feeling than as you are walking into that courtroom to face whatever type of punishment is about to be handed down to you for whatever reason that you're going into that courtroom in the first place. The third scariest thing about being locked up to make this list has to be, will you survive this? And I know that sounds like a pretty broad and cliche type of thing right there, but that is the absolute truth. You will definitely find yourself wondering that at least a few different times throughout any amount of time that you serve. You know, and this far exceeds violence. Will you be killed while locked up, which is something that could definitely happen to you. And I don't care where you are at, from a level 1 to a level 5. From a minimum security all the way up to an administrative, it does not matter. It does not matter where you are, because violence, it takes place anywhere that you're going to serve time. And sometimes, I'm not saying in all cases, but definitely in sometimes, a low-level facility can be just as violent as a high level. Because you've got guys at these low levels who just feel like they have to go hard because they're here at these low levels. And they feel like they belong at the maxes. They belong at the medium. They feel like they belong at least at a level 3 or a level 4. And surprisingly, when some of these guys act up to the point where that's where they're getting ready to get shipped to, I've seen some of these guys absolutely terrified, thinking that's where they're getting ready to go after they've already done everything in their power to ensure that they would be sent there. It's almost like they think that that's not going to happen to them. But your own personal safety and well-being will definitely be a concern, if not a major fear, that absolutely terrifies you at least a couple of times throughout any amount of time that you serve. Whether that fear comes from beef that you have with a certain prisoner, or maybe a set, an entire gang. There was a time while I was locked up that I had a major gang leader of a Spanish gang ready to set a hit out on me, just because I was joking with one of his fellow gang members. And the crazy thing about it was this fellow gang member of his was a friend of mine. And this major gang leader was my bunkie. You know, one of the most terrifying times that I personally experienced while I was locked up was during this situation right here. And again, I dealt with both of these guys. I played soccer with both of these dudes. At first, I was cool with both of these guys. But a little joking between me and this one dude would end up having my bunkie, this leader, ready to want to attack me. And I already knew this guy's reputation. I knew this guy was nothing to play with. I knew this guy was someone you had to take serious. It had only been a couple of weeks or maybe months prior where I was hearing about this guy chasing another prisoner around the rec yard with a knife. And what would end up making this situation that much more scary is not only was I sharing a bunk with this dude in an open dorm housing unit, but they would end up doing some maintenance in the housing unit, painting the bunks, where all of the prisoners would have to spend the night in the hole, in a two-man cell, with the guy that they share a bunk with. And during this beef, during this scary, stress-filled time, we would end up having to spend this night together in this cell, completely away from everything else. And if the violence was gonna occur, that's when it was gonna occur. And if this guy wanted to attempt to stab me, this is when it was gonna happen. Do you know that when they put the two of us in that cell together, I didn't even sit down. This guy was smaller than me. He was shorter than me, but stocky. I'm tall. I'm big. But size definitely doesn't matter when you're locked up. And size definitely doesn't matter if there's a potential that this guy has a knife. And I knew that he had one. And again, I didn't sit down. I stood right there by the door as he sat right there on his bunk, and he said to me, he said, "Joe, I don't want to have to kill you." It was one of the scariest times that I had ever been in. And I didn't fold. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. But I did tell him, I said, you know, I don't want you to have to attempt to do that neither. And you know, we would end up talking this situation out. And I don't know, had this gone any other type of way, would the result have been the same thing? If I hadn't have been this guy's bunkie first, if I hadn't have known this guy and been cool with him on the soccer field and been pretty well respected with the rest of the Spanish dudes who were on this prison, my last name being Guerrero, even though I'm just a white dude, I don't know what, if any, or all of those variables played into this situation, but we were able to come to some type of a resolution. I apologized for disrespecting his fellow gang member. And though that may seem like I folded, that was the safest alternative. At least I didn't have to protect myself from some sort of a knife attack in that cell, cast away from the rest of the prison, cast away from any type of help. Will you survive? And again, it doesn't have to just be from a violence aspect. You know, there's been dudes who have gotten sick and have died because they didn't receive proper or adequate or timely medical care. There was a time when I came out of the hole. I went to the hole for tattooing, and I came out and I took a new bunk in a new housing unit. And when I walked in there, everybody was looking at me crazy. I didn't know why. But I would soon find out that the bunk that I had taken belonged to a guy who 2 days prior or 72 hours prior, I can't remember, was out on the rec yard walking around with his buddy with a cup of coffee in his hand. And all of a sudden he stopped, he grabbed the fence, said something, and then he just dropped dead. You know, I legitimately felt like that bunk was haunted. I legitimately would have like nightmares and feel like cold chills coming over my body. And I've never been one to believe in any type of paranormal type of stuff. But that was the closest that I ever came to feeling like something like that was very real. You could get sick while locked up. I've been in housing units where the entire housing unit has been locked down under a medical quarantine for something that they're not even telling us why we're being locked down. When you're seeing guys a couple of bunks away from you who were so sick that they're shaking and looking like they're about to die, and you're locked up in this environment with them. The guards won't even come into the housing unit. They're sending kitchen workers in there with masks on, pushing trays in there. Will you survive this time in prison? Will most certainly be a very scary thing to think about. The fourth thing to make this list might sound a little crazy, but I can guarantee you this is a real fear. This is something that is guaranteed to be scary to you at a certain point during any time that you spend in prison. And it's thinking about, will you get released? That is, if you have a release date. You know, it'll be more toward the end of your incarceration after you spent however much time locked up. But you are guaranteed to find yourself worrying, what if I don't get released? What if my paperwork somehow gets misplaced? It definitely happens. I've seen guys' release date come and they don't get released. And this might only take a couple of days, maybe a day to get this situation resolved, but I've seen this take even longer. I've seen this take weeks. I've seen one guy sit in there for months, almost a year after his release date. And for whatever reason, this guy wasn't released. And there's a good potential that you could see situations just like this. And even if you think that you won't worry whether you're going to get released or not, they're not going to mess my paperwork up. Nothing's going to happen. I'm going to get released on time. It says it right here. X, Y, and Z date. I'm getting released. Even if you think that you won't be scared just a little bit, you're not going to be able to help but to think this. And the reason is because there's going to be other people. It could be a few, it could be two, it could be a whole lot of people. Other people who are around you who have this fear, who are scared of this exact thing. And that fear can't do anything but spread. And you know, I said that this is something that could definitely be a fear and a scary thought more toward the end of your incarceration. But this could be a thought and a fear that you have from the very beginning. Because you could find yourself thinking, as I oftentimes did, you know, what if something else happens while I'm locked up? What if I catch some additional charges and get some additional time? What if somebody tries to plant something on me? What if somebody tries to say that I did something and it's something that I didn't even do? Or one of my biggest fears in relation to this right here, what if I don't get released? One of my biggest fears with this was, what if I get in a fight? And I'm not a fighter. I've lost more times than I've ever won, but I will go. But what if I get in a fight and that other guy hits his head? There is nothing but concrete and steel inside of any jail or prison. What if the guy that I'm fighting hits his head? What if this guy gets killed? What if that happens and I never go home? You know, when you think about the fear and how scary of a place that prison is, that far exceeds anything that you could ever imagine when you think about the cliche things. The biggest, toughest prisoners, getting beat up, getting something stolen from you. The mental anguish that you will deal with serving time is, to me personally, the absolute scariest part about being in prison. The fifth thing to make this list in relation to the scariest things about prison or being locked up, for me personally, and this is another thought. You know, this video has pretty much just been about the scariest thoughts that you're definitely going to think while serving time. But like I had just mentioned, you know, that mental torture that you will go through, because you're oftentimes not going to be able to do anything but think. You certainly got enough time on your hands to do so. Could be far worse than anything that you ever experienced physically in prison. And the fifth thing making this list is a perfect example of that. What if I get released and I come back? You know, while you're locked up, all you're going to be thinking about is how bad you want to get back out there into the free world. How bad you want to get out there and do the right thing. And you're going to do it this way and that way. And you got X, Y, and Z planned. And you ain't never coming back. Or maybe you're thinking you're going to get out and you're going to do the same thing that you were doing before you got locked up. But this time you won't get caught. But no matter what you have planned for your release, what if you get out there and it doesn't work out? And what if you get released only to end up coming back again for your second time, or your fourth time, or your sixth time? What if you can't get it right? What if you can't overcome the addiction? What if you can't stop using? What if you end up just like the old heads that surround you? Some of these guys being on their fourth or better trip to prison. What if you end up just like some of these people that you despise? I can't tell you how many times for me personally, that was one of the biggest fears that I had. In fact, it was such a scary thought for me that I would have nightmares, night terrors, sometimes waking up screaming, thinking about this type of stuff. Sometimes dreaming about using drugs or getting chased by the police or police dogs. And in those dreams, I was using those drugs. I was getting caught by those police who were chasing me. I can remember one dream vividly, and I don't even know why. but I was being chased by these police dogs through some kind of woods, almost like on a mountainside, going downhill. I'm running down this mountain as these police dogs are closing in on me. And I hid underneath this little ravine or this ledge. And I'll never forget, right before I woke up, that police dog was right there in my face, just looking at me. It stopped right there when it got to me and just looked at me. And I woke up immediately thereafter in a cold sweat, because the thought of getting released this very last time and going back was one of the scariest things that I dealt with while being in prison. I've shared 5 of the scariest things about being in prison, but I want to share with you one more thing. Number 6. And this one is pretty crazy to think about. But this was also another major fear, another thing that absolutely terrified me and scared me to death. And I am sure it has done the same for countless others as well. And that is, what if I don't get anything from this at all? What if all of this time has been for nothing? All of these many different times that I've been locked up, the many different times to jail, the 2 different times to prison, what if this has all been for nothing? As much as I've been trying to use this for some kind of positive self-growth, what if I've just been delusional and all of this goes out the window as soon as I get released? And what if I don't even realize that? What if I leave from this situation worse than when I came in here? And when you think about being locked up for any amount of time, whether we're talking about a year, maybe even 6 months, a couple of years, 7 years like I served, 40 years like Danny served, think about the mental stability that a person comes home with after serving any amount of time. Are they going to deal with PTSD? Are they going to deal with stress? Any form of anxiety? Depression? And the answer to that question is they absolutely are. Being locked up affects everyone differently. There's guys who can do this their entire life, and they can carry on like this is the best thing that's ever happened to them, and this is what they were born to do. This is all life is given to me, and I'm just going to accept this for what it is. And that's a terrifying thought, that you could end up like that. But for the most part, everybody who serves any amount of time, they come back out here into the free world with any number of those mental problems. And I myself have been out of prison for almost 3 years. And I still deal with each and every one of those things that I just mentioned to you. And all of those things could be a cause or a trigger for you to go back to your old ways, for you to use again, for you to end up locked up again. But the one thing that I realized personally myself this time, finally, this time, after the umpteenth time being locked up, is no matter how hard you work to try to better yourself so that you're prepared to get released, you're never going to be fully prepared for getting released. And you're just going to have to try to make the most out of whatever situation you're faced with. And you most certainly are going to be fighting an uphill battle. Far beyond employment, probation or parole, housing and stability, because you're also going to have to throw into that the mental toll, the mental anguish that incarceration is going to put you through, and that you could very likely carry with you for the rest of your life. So if you've never been locked up before, let this be the scariest video that you've ever watched in your life. And if you have been locked up, well, let this be the same. Because I'm going to be completely honest with you, after dissecting all of these things with you, I'm terrified myself. Maybe I needed this. It's almost like some reflection. And I hope that this is something that you're able to do as well. Reflect on a very scary place that you don't ever want to go back to. And a place that could be scarier than you've ever even imagined. Hey, look, that's it. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did so, please leave a like and a comment letting me know exactly what you thought about it. As always, until next time, enjoy life, the free world. Never take a moment for granted, and make the most of every day.